Well, you never have to worry about Claude or any of your favorite AI systems going down if you have a backup slash local AI system. So I did an episode on local AI and a range of possibilities you could have with it. And today we're going to talk more about it because you guys said you want another episode. So here we are. Make sure you listen to the first episode on local AI, which I break down what it is and how it works and why it's so useful. But today we're going to zoom out a little bit and talk about the open source community and things like Obsidian and how they fit into your day to day life. Okay, so let me actually start with the term open source because I think it gets thrown around in ways that make it sound like way more niche or out of this world than it like actually is, especially for like non-technical people. Open source is basically a software development philosophy. Okay, so the core idea is simple. The code that powers a piece of software is made publicly available so that anyone can read it, study it, modify it, build on top of it. Like that's it. And yeah, it's like a decades old approach to building technology that has produced some of the most foundational software in the world, right? Like we don't have to constantly reinvent the wheel if someone has already created a piece of software that people can eventually build on top of. For example, the operating system that runs most of the internet servers is open source. Like a huge portion of the tools that developers use every single day are open source, right? Like the web browser you might be using right now is built on open source foundations. Like this is not fringe, right? This is like legitimate architecture that developers have been using for decades to build out these systems that we use today. Now, here's where it gets relevant to AI. When a company or like research institution trains an AI model and then releases the model's weights publicly, meaning they release the actual mathematical structure that makes the model work, that model becomes open source. Does that make sense? So anyone can download it, run it, modify it, study how it was built, and even fine tune it for specific use cases, which I have done. The institutions doing this are like not like small institutions, right? Like Meta has released Llama, which is one of the most widely used open source models in the world, right? Google released Gemma. Mistral, which is a French AI research lab, and one of my favorite, has released several, and I mean several, shout out to them, several highly capable open source models. IBM released a Granite, which is a really good model, by the way. Um, for my specific use case, these are not like underground projects, right? Like these are deliberate decisions by major institutions to contribute to this shared ecosystem, right? So when you hear uh, things like open source AI, I want you to hear AI with a publicly available blueprint so that researchers, developers, anyone can study it and build on top of it. Okay, so that's what it means. So the question of whether or not to trust it is not about, oh, is it like mainstream enough, right? The question is about understanding what you're downloading, where it comes from, and whether your hardware and your knowledge level are ready for it, right? So like as you've heard me say, like open source is oftentimes built upon by developers, by researchers, right? And obviously technical people from a wide range of backgrounds are building on top of this. Okay, so I want to take you back to something. If you were online in the early 2000s and you had an iPod or an MP3 player, you probably remember LimeWire. Actually, they came out of the woodwork on Threads recently, and I was like, because I think they like put out a thread. They were like, "Do you remember us?" And it's like, bruh, of course we remember you. You were spreading malware on everyone's devices in the early 2000s. That's hilarious. So for those of you who don't know, LimeWire was like a peer-to-peer file sharing platform. So you could search for almost any song, click download, and like get it free, and it was incredibly like popular. It also came with like a very serious catch, which I just said, because anyone could upload anything to that network. You never really knew what you were downloading, so you'd search for like a Beyonce song, and sometimes you would get that song, but sometimes you would get a virus, right? Like so sometimes you would even get a file that was labeled as a song and turned out to be like something completely different. So the ecosystem was real, The music was real, but navigating it required like a level of awareness that most people like just didn't have. And a lot of people had to learn the hard way, right? And I think for a lot of people who are now navigating this era, I often say, like, we're in the LimeWire era of AI development, right? Like, we are actively creating new standards of engagement with AI, agentic AI tools, new architectures, new systems, right? And we're all figuring it out in real time. But let me also be clear, the open source AI community is not LimeWire, right? The legal and ethical frameworks are completely different, and most of the major repositories are actively moderated by these institutions and foundations, right? So, like, big companies have produced open source models, but the spirit of that analogy that I just gave holds up in one important way. The ecosystem is large, it is open, and your ability to navigate it safely depends on how much you understand about what you're actually dealing with. And this is why education is so important. Part of the reason why I'm making this podcast, right? So when you download a model from a repository like Hugging Face, for example, you are downloading a large file, sometimes several like gigabytes in size, that contains the mathematical weights of an AI system, right? So most of the models on reputable platforms are exactly what they say they are. Okay, so like don't freak out. They've been downloaded by thousands or if not millions of people. They have community reviews, they have documentation. Like the ecosystem has its own quality signals if you know how to read them as a developer, as a technical person, as someone who is like, learning ML, all these systems, right? So the risk isn't really about viruses the way that LimeWire was. The risk is about making decisions without the foundation to make them well, right? So like downloading a model that is too large for your hardware, right? Like running something that gives you terrible results because it wasn't designed for your use case, right? Or simply feeling so overwhelmed by the options that you either give up or make a random choice that like doesn't really serve you, right? Like that's a real risk. Like lack of information and knowledge about what you're doing is the real risk in this era. Okay. So that's why I was like, okay, let me just like clarify that. If you have never used a mainstream AI product or system before, if you have never spent real time using ChatGPT, Claude, Gemini, local AI is probably not where you should start. Okay. And this is not about like gatekeeping or anything like that. It's just making sure that you are aware of how these mainstream systems work first before you start developing and building upon your own personal tools and personal solutions. Okay. So, local AI makes the most sense when you already have a clear sense of what you want, what you want from an AI tool, Um, you know what good responses look like. You know what tasks you reach for AI to help with. Like you understand roughly what these systems can and can't do. When you have that baseline, switching to a local model is a meaningful choice where you are trading certain capabilities for privacy and cost saving. I have saved a lot of money. And you understand that trade off because you have experienced both sides of it. Okay, is that making sense? So, without that baseline, local AI becomes confusing in ways that have nothing to do with local AI itself. Like, I could already see some questions coming in. You might think that the model is bad when the problem is actually that you don't know how to prompt it yet. You might think something is broken when the issue is that your hardware is underpowered for the exact model you chose, right? Like you might have a frustrating experience and conclude that AI in general doesn't work for you when actually you just started in the wrong place, right? So think about it this way. Before agentic coding became a thing where essentially like AI can write and execute code on your behalf, I had already spent serious time learning to code myself. So when agentic coding tools came along, they didn't replace my understanding. They just essentially accelerated it, right? Like my workflow got dramatically faster because I already knew what I was looking at and what I was trying to build, right? Like the AI became a tool I could actually direct rather than a black box I was just blindly like dependent on, right? So the same principle applies here. Spend time with the mainstream model first, get fluent with it, understand what you're using it for and like what it gives you. Then, when you move to local AI, you're making an informed decision about a specific set of trade offs, not just hoping like something works. So if you are already at that point, if you have been using AI tools for a while and you are ready to think about what local AI could do for your workflow, then just subscribe so you do not miss where this is going. Like I am literally obsessed with local AI and edge computing because a lot of people are focusing on building bigger and bigger models where, for certain use cases, obviously, I understand the need to throw as much like data and compute at these systems. But for like other cases, I'm like, how about we actually try to build smaller? Like, how do we, get these systems, these really powerful systems to work on edge devices? Like, like that is just as innovative as can we build bigger models? And here's something else that I also want to be clear about because I think this can be confusing for some people. Like local AI and commercial AI are not in opposition, right? Like I've talked about how big AI companies have produced open source models that run locally on your computer, right? Like obviously I use commercial AI tools. I use Claude, um, I use them specifically for agentic coding, for building the very local AI tools and projects I work on, because the compute power, the context window, the speed of frontier models when you're doing something like writing and like debugging complex code is hard to replicate locally. Although it's slowly getting better though. Hold on, because my local agentic AI tool has been, pretty good so far. And it's like only improving. Um, Especially if you want something like really fast and reliable, obviously you would use like a commercial AI tool if you want that speed, right? So it's all about using the right tool for the right job. That's actually the most like sophisticated version of this conversation, right? Like it's not a question of local AI versus big tech, but it's more so like what does my personal AI ecosystem actually look like and what belongs where, right? So like a lot of people are using agentic coding to build tools that will still rely on like APIs and clouds and servers and things of that sort, right? But for my personal AI system, so I make sure that it's constantly running, I use agentic AI tools to code out my local AI systems and then just plug in my local LLM as the brain behind those systems so that eventually I won't have to rely on commercial cloud-based AI systems, right? So, um, for personal notes, for research, for private thinking, for especially for sensitive documents, that's how I even went down this rabbit hole because I had a data set that under no circumstances could I, because it was a restricted access data set. I couldn't upload it to a server. I had to be very, careful about where it was being used. Obviously, absolutely under no circumstances could I like upload it to a commercial AI system, right? So, for certain sensitive things, local tools, local AI makes the most sense, right? Unless you have like sophisticated sandboxing that you can use with like commercial tools, which I know some universities are really good at helping researchers do that. So make sure you talk to your friends in the IT department because they're most likely amazing and always like ready to help you. At least my IT department is. So yeah, for heavy computational tasks like complex coding and anything that benefits from the most capable models available, commercial tools most likely will be the better fit. Like, ideally paired with, an enterprise agreement that governs like how your data is handled once again. So like for example, my university account, they have a special agreement with these AI companies that they can't train on our data, and we have like special like data rules and stuff like that. So that's why I'm like enterprise accounts are typically very different from regular commercial accounts. So like for example, I do all my coding with my enterprise account because I know those safeguards are in place. Shout out to Harvard for giving us those terms and conditions. So yeah, just want to make that part clear. But this is worth understanding if you are a professional who handles sensitive data. Enterprise agreements with AI companies typically include specific provisions about data handling, right? So your prompts may not be used for training. There may be stronger privacy guarantees. If you're in that situation and you're not sure what your agreement covers, I think that's worth finding out, is basically all I'm saying. Because once again, if you're covered by a strong enterprise agreement, your privacy concerns with commercial AI may already be addressed in ways that you're like not aware of. If you're not covered by that kind of agreement, meaning you are an individual or a small organization using a standard like consumer account, then local AI becomes a much more compelling option for anything sensitive that you're doing. Once again, not because commercial AI is like, oh my gosh, it's super bad. No, that's not what I'm saying. It's more so because the data handling in terms of consumer products are different from enterprise ones, and you deserve to understand like that distinction. And this is also where the on-premise server analogy actually becomes quite useful. Sorry, I know I'm like babbling about. I try not to like go on tangents, but like organizations used to run their own servers in-house for exactly this reason. Like they wanted control over their data and their infrastructure. And then cloud computing became cheap and convenient, and most of them just migrated to the cloud, right? The technology has now shifted again in an interesting direction. Like the models have gotten small enough and efficient enough that a powerful personal computer, something like a modern MacBook with the M series chip, I have an M4, and sufficient memory can run meaningful, AI workloads locally. Right. So you essentially have the option of a personal server sitting on your desk running AI that never touches the outside world. Right. Um, so yeah, I just want to make sure all of that was clear. Okay, so Obsidian, we talked about Obsidian in the last episode. So let me explain what Obsidian actually is, because I think it gets described in ways that makes it sound way more complicated than it needs to be. So Obsidian is a note-taking and knowledge management application. Okay, so when you create a note in Obsidian, it saves as a markdown file directly on your device. That's it. Nothing is uploaded, nothing is synced to a company server, unless you specifically pay for the optional like sync feature, because obviously some people want to sync between their phone and their desktop, right? So that's optional. But your notes are yours. They live on your machine, and they're stored in a format that is essentially plain text with some like lightweight formatting, right? Now, let me explain what a markdown file is, because it comes up constantly in the open source and local AI world. A markdown file is just a text file with some simple formatting like symbols added in, right? So a hashtag at the beginning of a line make something like a heading. Two asterisks around a word make it bold. A dash at the beginning of a line makes it a bullet point. Like that's the whole system. It's just like the reason people use Markdown is that it's readable by humans without any special software, and it's compatible with almost every tool in existence. It's like a universal file system, and it doesn't lock your writing into any proprietary format like doc or .powerpoint, right? Like if Obsidian shuts down tomorrow, God forbid, um, which actually doesn't matter because essentially your files would still be perfectly readable in any text editor on any device. And also you own your files, like Obsidian doesn't. So actually it doesn't matter if they shut down, but I hope they don't because the founder is amazing. So this is why Obsidian fits so naturally into the local AI system, because your notes are local and your AI is local and your data stays on your machine. So the file format is open and portable, and the whole thing is just coherent as a system. Like connecting my Obsidian to my local AI brain has been amazing, because I have personal AI agents that basically like helps me with project management and helps me stay focused. And the fact that my local AI can read my Obsidian folder is just like amazing. So now I want to be honest about the learning curve because I mentioned it in part one and like people had questions. So Obsidian can feel overwhelming at first, and the reason is the plugin ecosystem, right? So there are hundreds of community built plugins that let you turn Obsidian into almost anything. It can turn it into a task manager, a database, a calendar, a research tool with linked references. Hello, that's me. A journaling system. Like Obsidian is just a foundational system for you to build personalized, amazing systems. And the breadth of what's possible also is what makes it feel like too much when you first open it. So my honest advice is ignore the plugins entirely, like for the first few weeks, right? Use Obsidian as a simple note-taking app. create notes, link between them, build a folder structure that makes sense to you. And once you have a clear sense of what friction you're experiencing, meaning like what you wish the tool did that it does not seem to do, then that is when you go looking for a plugin or like special layovers, right? Like solve specific problems rather than trying to configure everything up front so that your Obsidian looks like, the pretty Obsidian screenshot you saw on Instagram, right? That approach applies to the whole local AI system, honestly. Start with one tool, one use case, one workflow, and get comfortable with that before you add anything else. Okay. Okay, so yeah, this is where we are. So you know what local AI is and why people use it. You know what the open source ecosystem is and where it actually comes from. And you know that navigating it well requires a foundation, and that the honest starting point is fluency with mainstream tools first. Um, yeah. So local AI versus commercial AI, they're not in opposition, obviously, because big tech companies have created their own local AI versions. They just serve different purposes. And the sophisticated move is basically you need to build out an ecosystem where each one does what it does best, right? And that you always have a system that runs regardless if, a mainstream system is down. Um, yeah, Oh, and we talked about Obsidian. Yeah, sorry. So yeah, we talked about Obsidian, what a markdown file is, and why local file formats matter for like data sovereignty. Really, that's the big thing. Yeah, so hopefully that's a meaningful amount of context because I know a bunch of people asked for a part two. And honestly, I feel like the conversation about AI literacy isn't really about which tools you use. It's about whether you understand enough to make choices rather than just following defaults. We are in the age of customization, okay? And I want you to feel empowered. That is like the number one goal with this podcast and with all of my AI education and literacy videos and content is to make you feel like you have a choice. And my job is to provide you with those choices. That's what I care about. So yeah, more options, more understanding, more agency. That's like always the point. Um, so yeah, if this episode was useful, share it with someone who is trying to figure out where to start with AI. It does not require a technical background to follow. And that was intentional. Like I want you guys to be able to understand what's happening. So subscribe and follow wherever you're listening, and I'll chat to you in the next voice note.